Hey everyone, Dan here with Hardly Brief Tutorials. Today we're going to start building a dialog system. The first video is going to focus on getting a simple dialog system up and running using scriptable objects. We'll then set up a basic interaction to test the dialog out, and we're going to go ahead and add a method to create a typing effect for the text. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button, and make sure to click the notification icon to get reminded when I do release a new video. It really does help out the channel a lot. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below and I'll be sure to respond. One more thing, I set up a new Discord server for the community. I created two major sections on the server. One is for Hardly Brief Tutorials, where you can ask me questions, you can ask other people questions, get some help on whatever you're working on. You can chat with other game developers, and you can even suggest tutorial ideas. So if there's something that you want me to work on, something you want me to show you how to do, add it there and we can start working on it. Also, I added a channel where I'm going to be posting the scripts from the videos that I create on the channel. So if you become a member of the Discord, you'll be able to download those scripts. The other major section is a personal devlog of mine for a tennis game I've been working on. So be sure to check that out. Follow along. I do post frequent updates on that, and I take suggestions as well. I have also created a Trello board for everyone to follow along to check out and see when videos are going to be uploaded to YouTube. You can see what I'm working on. You can see what's going to be released next. And then all the suggestions I get from the Discord or from Twitter or from the YouTube comments, I'm going to put in the backlog on that Trello board. And then maybe we could do some voting or something to show you, to figure out what exactly everyone wants me to work on and show you how to do. So if that all sounds interesting, again, please join us on the Discord. I'll put the link in the description below. But let's go ahead and get started. All right, so before we get started with the code, let's go ahead and set up our project. I'm in a brand new Unity 2D project. This does also work in 3D, so the same stuff applies. In my assets folder, I have the scenes folder. I have a folder called scriptable objects that we're going to use. And then I have a scripts folder with the dialog system folder in it with 3 scripts that we're going to go over in this video, so don't worry about that just yet. In my hierarchy over here, I have a main camera, and one important thing for this main camera that we need to get all this to work is we need to add a component to it called a physics 2D raycaster, or just raycaster if you're using 3D. So we go to add component, type in raycast, and you'll see physics 2D raycaster. Because again, this is a 2D project. If you're in 3D, you'll use the physics raycaster. But I'm going to add the 2D raycaster here. This will allow us to interact with our sprite. I have a canvas on here, an event system. I'm also using the new Unity input system, and I'll post a link to the video on how to get that up and going. But basically, using the new Unity input system, you're going to have a warning over here when you add an event system. You'll need to click the button here to convert it to the new input system and events. And then again, I have this canvas with a panel, which is this white panel here on screen. I have renamed it to Dialog UI. It does have a Dialog UI script attached to it, but again, we're going to work on that in the video, so don't worry about that just yet. And then I have a sprite here, just a white character, a white box that I've scaled up a little differently. It has a box collider 2D that's important for our interactions to work properly, so make sure you add a box collider 2D to it. And then again, I have a Dialog Controller script, which we're going to write in this video. So once you have the project set up, go into your scripts folder, create a dialog system folder, and the first thing we're going to write is the dialog scriptable object class. So if you go right click, create C# script, and you're going to name it dialog scriptable object. So once you've done that, double click, open it up, and let's go into Visual Code and check it out. All right, so I'm in my dialog scriptable object class. I deleted the mono behavior, and instead it inherits from scriptable object. If you haven't used scriptable objects before in the past, they are a great data container. They allow you to edit the values while you're in play mode, and when you exit out of play mode, it will save it automatically. It's perfect for saving some simple data settings and stuff, so it's great for our dialog system. First thing to note, at the top of this class, I have a create asset menu. It's in square brackets where you pass in a file name and a menu name. This will make a little bit more sense when we go back into Unity and I show you how we create the scriptable object. But basically, I've called my file name Dialog Object. So every time I create a new instance of this scriptable object, it's going to be called Dialog Object, and then I can rename it. The menu name is what this comes up as under the asset menu. And again, that will make more sense once we jump back into Unity. But let's go over the public variables first, and then some of the protected stuff. and then we'll go into Unity and we'll create an actual asset. So the first thing I have up top is a dialog complete event that goes off when we finish this dialog object. So once we go through all the text, then we can go ahead and fire this dialog complete event, and whatever's listening to it can do whatever. So maybe we want to save, maybe we have a save action, we want to save to player prefs, we can use this event to go ahead and save once the dialog's complete. These 4 public variables are the settings for our scriptable object. So the first thing is a list of strings called dialog text. And this is going to be all the text that this dialog object is going to have. So this can be as big as you want, and it's the size of a list. But basically this will say, like, if you go up to a shopkeeper and you want them to greet the player, you can have all the different types of options that player, that NPC character can say. So like, welcome to my shop, hello, how are you doing, whatever you want. That would be stored in this dialog text object. We have a value here called isLoopable, and this just checks to see whether or not we want to loop this text over and over again. So if I repeatedly click this NPC, let's say you have someone walking around a town, and every time you click on them, you want them to say, hey, how's it going? Or stop clicking on me, it's annoying, and you want that to loop every time the player clicks on them. You can go ahead and check this box, isLoopable. Is ordered. Sometimes you want text to come in a specific order, but not all at once, right? So you want to say, hey, how are you doing? Please check out the items in my shop. You want that order text every time, and this Boolean value, this flag, will allow you to do that. And then we have a public dialog scriptable object, which this is the object we're in, called next dialog. In part 2, in the next video, we're going to cover how to use this more specifically. So now that you have these 4 public variables, if you click save, we can go back into Unity, and we can actually see, oh, sorry about that. We can actually see this work. I'm clicking on the wrong project here. Okay, so we can actually see this in action. So I'm in my assets folder. I'm going to double click to go into my scriptable objects. I'm going to go to assets, create, dialog system. You see it's called a dialog object. I'm going to call this NPC example SO for scriptable object. Oh, I think I put an SP in there. Let's rename it. This can be whatever you want. It doesn't have to have SO on it. Name it whatever you want. Over here on the inspector, you can see that now we have a dialog text object, and if I click the arrow, it has a list that says it's empty. If I click the plus button, I can go ahead and type something. So I can say hello world, and this will be some text that shows up on our screen. If you're in an older version of Unity, it might just say element, like the UI is a little different. You'll go up here to the array size and click 1, and then you can type in whatever you want. And again, you can make this as big as you want, so you can say 5, and you can add a whole bunch of different text objects. And then we have our flags. So we have isLoopable and isOrdered. And then again, we have scriptable object next dialog is that. So I can actually drag the one we create and this would be like a recursive dialog, and it just keeps repeating itself if we wanted to do that. But I'm going to click none for now. So this is what a scriptable object looks like in the inspector. Let's go back to the code though, because there's a few things that I want to go over. So I have a whole bunch of protected variables here. This allows us to expand on this class. So in the next video, we're going to create a branching dialog system where we're going to expand this dialog object and add more functionality to it. So I did that. So these are protected variables, so I can actually access them when we expand it. The first one is a dialog ID. The idea behind this is to have a unique identifier that will allow us to identify what this this dialog object is outside of if we don't know the scriptable object, we can refer to its dialog ID. And that will be a use case for that is if you built a database type system that stored all those ID values, and then you could create like a search table that the NPC goes to that table and say, hey, I've completed this ID, what's my next ID? And then it can go retrieve that data. If you guys are interested in something like that, let me know down in the comments below, and I can work on a video to show how to implement that. Lastly, or not lastly, but next we have a bool called has completed. So this just says, hey, is our dialog complete, yes or no? We have a queue here of strings, which is called ordered dialog. So if the is ordered bool is checked true, it's true, then we want to go ahead and create a queue of those dialog of the strings so that we can kind of go in order the specific order that you kind of added them into the scriptable object. And lastly here I have a bool array called read history. We're going to use this in part 2 of the video. So then in the next video we're going to actually add read history to our dialog system. The first method I have here is called getNextDialog. It returns a string and its set is virtual, so we can override it again if we expand on this class. At its core, what it does is, I'll go over this if statement in just a second, but really it just returns it gets a random index, and then it returns a random dialog text or dialog string from the dialog text list. That's what it does, unless isOrdered is true. So if isOrdered true, you have ordered dialog. Then what it's going to do is it's going to first check to see if the count of the queue is greater than 0, meaning that there is something in that queue. If there is, it's going to go ahead and return that value. So order.dialog.dq, that takes the top string in that queue and returns it. If it's 0, meaning our queue is empty, then we're going to check to see if it's loopable. If the text is loopable, then we're going to build a text queue. This is a method that I wrote down below we'll go over. And then we're going to return the first part of that queue. Else, so it's not loopable and we are out of things to go in order, then we're going to say onDialogComplete, and we'll call this method that I also wrote down below. So the onDialogComplete method, it's virtual, it's protected, so we can override it if we expand the class. And the only thing it does right now is invokes the event DialogComplete that is at the top. What you do here is if you have some sort of save system set up, you would call that save system potentially, call that database, say, hey, the viewer has already looked at this, or the player has already viewed this dialog and we don't need to show it again. We can save that progress here. I have a private onEnable, so this is the same mono behavior type onEnable, and the only thing I'm doing here is if isOrdered is checked, meaning isOrdered is true, then we're going to go ahead and build a text queue. And the build text queue method is pretty simple. We look at our order dialog private variable, or protected variable, excuse me, and then we create a new string. It's empty and we need to populate it, so I do a for loop. And basically for each text object, each string object that's in our dialog text list, which is the public list up top, for each string that's in there, we're going to enqueue it into our dialog. So what's important about that, let's go back into Unity. If I have a list here, hello world 2, if you are going to make this ordered and you click isOrdered, make sure whatever the list is, that's the order it's going to be in. So if hello world 0 should be up top, make sure that you actually have that up top. So again, the order of the list is important if you're going to have isOrdered check true, because that's the order it will be in. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so that's the scriptable object. Again, if you want to create one, you go up to Assets, Create, and then you can create a dialog system, and that's the scriptable. That's the container for our information. Now we're going to take a look at the Dialog Controller. So in my scripts folder, Dialog System, I have a class here called Dialog Controller. Go ahead and right-click, create C# script, and create that, and we'll go into Visual Code and check that one out. Okay, so I'm in the Dialog Controller class. This is a class that's going to handle how we actually interact with the Dialog UI, and this is going to help display the dialog information that's stored in our scriptable object. So at its core, this is going to be attached to the NPC or whatever object you want to be able to have a discussion with. This will be on that character. So at the top, though, what's important is because I'm using the new Unity input system, I have the namespace event systems included. So I'm using Unity Engine.event systems, and this allows me to access the iPointClick handler interface, which again you're going to need. So after mono behavior, put a comma, and then iPointerClick handler interface. This will allow us access to the onPointerClick event, and that's the first method we're going to discuss. So I have an onPointerClick event where I call onInteract. So basically I have clicked our NPC, I have clicked whatever we want to have dialogue with or show dialogue from. I've clicked it, and now we're going to onInteract with it. So here what I'm doing is I'm having a debug statement that says interact. It's just saying, hey, I've clicked this person. And then we're going to show text in our Dialog UI, which is a public variable I have at the top. So public dialog UI, that's the next class that we're going to write. And I have a public reference to it so we can drag it and drop it in the inspector. And then I have a dialog scriptable object called current dialog object. And this is the data set, the scriptable object that we created that will show the text, that stores the text. And then we can access that using the getNextDialog method. So I have the mono behavior on enable and on disable. This is just adding a listener to the next button that's attached to our UI. So when I click next on the UI, or if I click on my character, it's going to call the onInteract method, and we want to remove that listener when we disable this object. So if we're not talking to the NPC, we don't want to listen to this onClick event on the next button because we're not talking to that NPC. So the core of this is the onInteract, and what it's doing, again, it's going to our dialog UI. It's saying show this text. It's showing the text from the scriptable object. I'm doing current dialog.getNextDialog, which is the method that we went through in the last part, and then passing in true or false here, and this is to show the typing effect. So now that I've gone over this dialog UI and the controller, let's go into the dialog UI class and explain how that works. So here I have a C# class. In that dialog system folder in Unity, you can go ahead and create it. It's just a of mono behavior, and it uses the namespace UI, so Unity engine.ui. I have a public event up top called typing text ended, and I just invoke that in my typing text coroutine, which I'll explain in just a moment. I have 3 public variables: a dialog box text, which is a text object, a button called next button, and then a type text delay, which is the delay time between each letter showing on the text box for the typing effect. The main method here is called show text. It takes in a string called text, which this is the message that it's going to show, the dialogue that's going to show on screen, and then a bool value, true or false, whether or not we want to use the typing text effect or not. So the first thing in show text, we're going to set this dialog object, game object, to true. We're going to turn it on. We're going to show it to the player, and then we're going to check. If should type is true, then we're going to go ahead and start this typing effect coroutine. If it's not, then we're just going to display the text using dialog text box text dot text is equal to the text. And this just the first part, start coroutine, does the typing effect for us, and then the second part just displays the text on screen. The coroutine here to handle the typing effect is pretty simple. What we're doing is we're looping through the full text, and for every time we loop through it, for the length of it, we're getting the iterator, the I, and we're doing a substring of it. So basically what this, and to create a object called current text, and then we apply it to our text box. So we set it equal to our text box, and then we wait a certain amount of time, and then it does the loop again. So what substring does, it says, okay, I'm going to get the first letter. So between 0 and 0, the first letter, 0 and 1, and we're going to put it current text. So in my case, it was hello world, right? So it's going to get H first, going to store it in current text. It's going to display it, and then we're going to wait however long our delay is. Then it's going to do it again, and now we're going to get a substring of full text from 0 to 2. So it's going to be HE, and it's going to store that in current text, and then we're going to output it to our text box, and then we're going to wait for that delay. Once it does that for the entire length of the string, then it's going to exit out of this for loop. We're going to typing text. We're going to invoke that event, the type texting event, and then we're going to yield return null, and this coroutine will end. So that's the UI, and that's the controller. These two work together hand in hand to show the dialogue on screen. Let's go into Unity and set up the UI and then actually test this out. All right, so we're back in Unity, and we need to set up our UI system. So again, I have a canvas over here with a panel I've called Dialog UI, and you can see it down in the scene view here. It has a few objects in it. It has a text object, which this is our message box, right? This is where our text will go, our dialogue text. I put the font size to 25. It's really dependent on what you want to do, but this is one quick way to get it up and working, right? So if I type this is message text, you can see this is where that text is going to go. We have a next button, which doesn't have any listeners or anything on it, right? We do that in code, but I have the next button here with the text saying next, and then I have a leave button, which this will exit out of this menu. And what I have done here on click, I've dragged the Dialog UI object here, and I go to game object for my function, and I set active is false, meaning when we click leave, it will turn off the UI. And by default, it's turned off. So once you have this set up, click Dialog UI. I'm going to turn the game object off so we can't see it. Let's go to our NPC character. So our NPC character, let me double click on it, is just this white sprite, right? This white box. I have the Dialog Controller attached to it. If you don't have yours attached to it, you can drag and drop it, and I'll do that now. You can just drag the controller to it, and it requires two things. It requires our Dialog UI, so I'm going to go to the inspector and grab the Dialog UI object and attach it there, and then it requires a current Dialog object, which is the scriptable object we created at the beginning. So if I go to Assets, Scriptable Objects, I can drag my object in there, or you can click this little box and it will come up with NPC example SO. Double click that and add it. So once you have all that, make sure that there's some data in your scriptable object. For me, it's set to is ordered and is loopable is true now. So basically what it will do, it should say hello world and then hello world 0 after it. And I should be able to keep clicking that and it should keep repeating it. So let's go to, that should all be set up. I'm going to press play and we'll test it out. So press play. I'm going to click on my character and it's going to say hello world. It typed it out. I should be able to click leave and it should turn off. It does. I'm going to click it again and it should say hello world 0, right? It's ordered text. And if I click next, because it's loopable, it's going to go back to hello world. So there we go. That's a very, very basic dialog system set up. And it's reading all the data in our scriptable object. So now, if I go back to my scriptable object, let's say we want to add another text. We'll say another string of dialogue. I click save. Let's click unordered. So this should just randomly select one for us. I'm going to press play. I'm going to click our character. And look, and because it's selecting a random value, it just says another string of text. I'm going to click the character, and you said hello world 0, another string of text. It's just randomly grabbing one. And every time I click, it's going to restart that coroutine. And I can also click next. So I don't just have to... there we go. I wanted to show hello world so you know it's actually random. But you can either click the character or you can click next, and then you can click leave. So this whole system is up and running. If you guys have any questions about it, any comments, leave them down below, and I'll be sure to answer them. In the next video, we're going to expand on this and actually create a more branching system. And there's a bunch of little details in here, use cases, I guess, that we need to account for. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at those. We're going to fix this up a bit and add branching dialogue. Again, if you like this video, hit the like and subscribe button. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys next time.